good evening. Are you wondering how a small town girl like me can create a big-time podcast like Sleeping with Heather? It's easy. I use Anchor. Anchor is free, and there are creation tools that allow me to record and edit my podcast right from my phone or computer. Anchor distributes my podcast for me to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms. I make money with my podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Try Anchor today. Welcome, travelers, aboard the Starship Dreamscape Enterprise. Have a seat and buckle up. I'd like to dedicate Episode 3 to the man of my life, a rescue pit bull named Todd. Todd has been undergoing heartworm treatment, and guess what? He's a rock star. He and his sister Stella are staying with me for a few days, so if you happen to hear snoring or snorting in the background, it's just the puppies making themselves known. Todd is snoring right now. We're off to a good start. Now, on with the show. Good evening, night listener. You're tuned into Sleeping with Heather, the podcast that puts you to sleep. I'll be with you for an hour and a half, so there's no need to rush. Fall asleep on your time. Relax, close your eyes, listen to the sound of my voice, and get ready to dream. I have something very special to share this evening. I recently discovered Bedtime Stories for Dogs by Leanne Joshua. I've had some hyper foster dogs lately who were unfazed by our 5-mile hikes. So I Googled Bedtime Stories for Dogs and came across Joshua's book. It worked like a charm. I reached out to ask her permission to share a story from the book, and she kindly obliged. And so, without further ado, I present to you CinderDane by Leanne Joshua. And it begins the way all good fairy tales do. Once upon a time, there was a great Dane named CinderDane. Her coat was blue-black, the color of charcoal. She was so dark that even though she was almost as tall as a horse, she could hide outside at night and no one would see her. But although she was big and smart, and her coat was beautiful, CinderDane had really low self-esteem. Because, you see, she lived with 3 small dogs, Beagle Bob, Tom Terrier, and New Yorkie, who were always running around her legs and causing her to trip. Many times behind her back, they would laugh at her and call her the klutz. They never did this to her face because they were afraid of her. After all, she could probably eat them for breakfast if she had a mind to. But CinderDane was a sweetheart. A pussycat, really. She wouldn't hurt a flea intentionally, though she had plenty of them. In her whole life, CinderDane had never met a dog nearly as big as she was. There was Dominic, the Dalmatian, who lived 3 houses down. But even he could walk under her tall legs. CinderDane was certain she would never find anyone to love, because she would never find anyone her own size. Then, one day, an invitation came in the mail to CinderDane's house. All creatures, great and small, is having a holiday party tomorrow afternoon, 7 o'clock. Bring your toys and your people. All creatures, great and small, was the name of the doggy hotel where CinderDane, Beagle Bob, Tom Terrier, and New Yorkie would stay when their people had to go away. It was a pretty nice place, and CinderDane always had fun there, even though, as usual, she was always the biggest dog, and often the other dogs yelped and screeched when she accidentally stepped on them. She really couldn't see them all the way down there. A party invitation might have been exactly what CinderDane needed to help cheer her up. Earlier that day, she had been to the vet for her regular checkup, and one of the technicians had said, "Whoa, look at the size of that dog." And he didn't mean it as a compliment. So, CinderDane was really down in the dumps that day, and just laid in the middle of the living room floor, staring vacantly into space. Beagle Bob, Tom Terrier, and New Yorkie, on the other hand, were very excited about the party. So excited, in fact, that Tom Terrier left a little puddle on the floor. Another thing CinderDane couldn't do because she would flood the whole house. The smaller dogs spent all morning trying to decide what to wear. Beagle Bob chose his blue sweater with the red buttons. Tom Terrier opted for his Hawaiian print shirt, a visor, and sunglasses. New Yorkie, always the height of fashion, chose a t-shirt that looked like a tuxedo with a red bow tie. And off they went, leaving CinderDane sleeping on the rug. CinderDane started to dream. She dreamed her fairy godmother showed up and offered to help her get ready for the party. "I'm here to grant your wish," said the fairy godmother. "You mean you can make me smaller?" asked CinderDane in her dream. "If that's what you really want," replied the fairy godmother, "but I wouldn't advise it. You're a beautiful dog, just as you are. I happen to like big dogs." But CinderDane was adamant. She wasn't going to the party unless she was small enough to play with the other dogs without hurting them. She wanted to fit through a dog door, jump on the sofa without breaking it, and eat dog bones that didn't come from dinosaurs. With a 1, 2, 3, poof, the fairy godmother shrank CinderDane. She was the size of a sheltie, only she still looked like a Great Dane. Wonderful, thought CinderDane in her dream. And as what usually happens in dreams, the next thing she knew, she was at the party, and all the other dogs were having cake and ice cream and playing Sniff the Tail on the donkey. When CinderDane walked in the room, no one noticed her. She said hello to Bagel Bob, Tom Terrier, and New Yorkie, but they didn't seem to know she was there. So she climbed up on top of a chair and started to bark, trying to get everyone's attention to show off her new look. But no one noticed. CinderDane started to get frustrated. Then she became sad. Finally, she ended up barking out for her fairy godmother. "I want to be a big dog again. I want to be a big dog again." Then she woke up. CinderDane stood up and looked at herself in the mirror. She decided maybe being the biggest dog wasn't all that bad. After all, everyone always noticed her when she was in the room. So, she decided to go to the party. CinderDane trotted down the street, taking her big dog steps and proudly holding her head up as she greeted everyone along the way. This time, when people pointed and stared, she was happy. When CinderDane arrived at the party, all the dogs were playing, just like in her dream. But when she walked in, everyone barked hello. And well, let's face it, a few barked to let her know she was standing on them. Then something wonderful happened. In through the front door walked the most handsome dog CinderDane had ever laid eyes on. An old English sheepdog. CinderDane had seen pictures in a book, with beautiful long hair that fell across his eyes, giving him an air of mystery. She walked right up to him and said, "Hi, my name is CinderDane. Welcome to the party." "I'm Prince," said the handsome stranger as he shook the hair out of his eyes. "And may I tell you that you are the most beautiful creature I have ever seen or smelled?" Well, like all stories, this one has to end. And this is the way it ends. CinderDane and Prince fell in love. It was love at first sight. Well, second sight for Prince, because his hair was in his eyes the first time. And as they sat in front of a fire in the fireplace, CinderDane thought to herself, "I guess there is someone for everyone. You're right, Fairy Godmother. I am happy being a big dog." The end. I agree with CinderDane. There really is someone for everyone. A lid for every pot, if you will. It's October 1st today, the beginning of my favorite month. Halloween is my favorite holiday, and I must admit, I'm a sucker for everything pumpkin. I was so thrilled when Starbucks brought back their pumpkin spice latte. Though here in North Carolina, you'd probably order it iced, as it's not yet sweater weather. I suppose I was drawn to the story of CinderDane because of how Cinderella rode in a pumpkin carriage. And well, it's currently pumpkin everything season. What I wouldn't give for a ride in a giant pumpkin. One of my favorite scents is the smell of a candle burning inside a freshly carved jack-o'-lantern. I also very much enjoy the smell of a Halloween sack full to the brim with assorted treats. My favorite is the candy corn. I mean, is it a vegetable or candy? Who cares? This time of year brings to mind many fond memories of my time in Binghamton, New York. If you happen to pass through upstate New York this month, be sure to stop at the Cider Mill Playhouse and enjoy fresh cider mill donuts. I've never been one for cider, but I'll never forget the steam rising from warm cups set out for the trick-or-treaters. A welcome invitation to warm their little fingers. I prefer my apples in their natural state. Oh, how I loved picking them from the orchards of upstate New York. What better way to celebrate the harvest than a hayride through fields of McIntosh and Honey Crisps? I always loved the tradition of bobbing for apples. Did you know, according to Wikipedia, the tradition of bobbing for apples dates back to the Roman invasion of Britain, when the conquering army merged their own celebrations with traditional Celtic festivals. The Romans brought with them the apple tree, a representation of the goddess of plenty, Pomona. During an annual celebration, unmarried people try to bite into an apple floating in water or hanging from a string on a line. The first person to bite into an apple would be the next one to be allowed to marry. Speaking of nuptials, for centuries in Eastern Europe, women used pumpkins to decline marriage proposals. Crazy, right? It's true. This old tradition held that a would-be suitor would visit a woman's house to propose. If the answer was yes, there was toasting and celebration. If the answer was no, the poor guy was silently handed a pumpkin. That's a big womp womp for us pumpkin worshippers. Pumpkins are such a source of joy for me. If I were an Eastern European man, I'd happily collect as many declined marriage proposals as possible. Though I admit, as much as I love pumpkins, they aren't the original gangsters of Halloween. Turnips are. That's right. These fleshy little missiles of fiber were the inaugural canvas for the jack-o'-lantern. If you want to go back to Halloween's roots, carve a turnip. No pun intended. Okay, maybe a little intended. Long before pumpkins became premier carving couture of the season, the Irish were carving ghoulish faces into the veggies to scare evil spirits away. The Carved Pumpkin Lanterns Association with Halloween is recorded in the November 1st, 1866 edition of the Daily News out of Kingston, Ontario. It reads, "The old-time custom of keeping up Halloween was not forgotten last night by the youngsters of the city. They had their maskings and their merrymakings, and preambled the streets after dark in a way which was no doubt amusing to themselves. There was a great sacrifice of pumpkins from which to make transparent heads and faces, lighted up by the unfailing 2 inches of tallow candle. The poet John Greenleaf Whittier, who was born in Massachusetts in 1807, wrote the poem The Pumpkin in 1850. Oh, fruit loved of boyhood, the old days recalling, when wooden grapes were purpling and brown nuts were falling, when wild, ugly faces were carved in its skin, glaring out through the dark with a candle within. Did you catch that? Oh, fruit loved by boyhood? Yes, pumpkins are fruit. And you know, not to pull a Kanye West on the whole pumpkin carving tradition, but they are hardly the only fruit I've used to make jack-o'-lanterns this time of year. Apples and pineapples have also sufficed. Yes, pineapples, baby. And they look so cool too with their spiky hairdos. I mean, come on. Pumpkins sport the very alfalfa look. But pineapples scream, cowabunga, dude. Happy Halloween. They smell equally delicious, baked from the inside. According to Wikipedia, the story of the jack-o'-lantern. Todd has begun snoring. By the way, I'm not sure if you can pick that up on audio. He is quite the snorer. Anyway, it's a little distracting on this end. The story of the jack-o'-lantern comes in many forms and is similar to the story of Will-o'-the-Wisp, retold in many different forms across Western Europe, including Italy, Norway, Spain, and Sweden. In Switzerland, children would leave bowls of milk or cream out for the mythical house spirits called Jack of the Bowl. An old Irish folktale from the mid-18th century tells of Stingy Jack, a lazy yet shrewd blacksmith who utilized a cross to trap Satan. One story says that Jack tricked Satan into climbing an apple tree, and once he was up there, Jack quickly placed crosses around the trunk, or carved a cross into the bark so that Satan couldn't get down. Bowls of milk or cream, eh? Perhaps the jolly fat man in the red suit is a copycat. It wasn't until the early 1900s that Santa guzzled copious amounts of udder juice. In fact, it wasn't until the Great Depression that we left cookies and milk out for Santa. Parents of the time wanted to inspire their children to share with others, which reminds me of a tradition my mom adopted of placing oranges in stockings. They're said to represent a gift of gold from St. Nicholas. It is said that Nicholas lived near a father and his 3 daughters who had fallen on hard times. So Nicholas secretly threw 3 bags of gold through their window, which were rumored to have landed in each of the girls' stockings that were hanging on the mantelpiece to dry. The father eventually found out who the gift giver was and was so moved he told everyone in town about Nicholas. Todd is still sleeping and has begun to snore. Anyway, this was not only the origin of Santa Claus, but also one reason for oranges, which represent bags of gold in our stockings. I love that fruit has worked its way into the fiber of our celebrations this time of year. The harvest season, to remind us of nature's bounty and that there is a time to reap and a time to sow, which brings to mind a beloved 1965 classic written by Pete Seeger and performed by the Byrds, simply titled Turn, Turn, Turn. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season. Turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born. A time to die. A time to plant, a time to reap, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to weep. Perhaps if I quoted the Bible instead of reading the lyrics, you would get the gist, and I would be less likely to go away for copyright infringement. For everything, there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek, and a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away, a time to rend, and a time to sow, a time to keep silent, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. And that verse is from I'm gonna mess this up. Ecclesiastes. Yeah, if I'm getting it wrong, feel free to tweet at me. That is from the American Standard Version. I'm not at all religious, and it's a wonderful verse. But perhaps if I had written the Bible, I might include there is a time to sleep, and I might erase a time to hate, because I think that if there were more love, there would be more peace in all aspects of life. We could all use more peace. I get the gist. I often feel my wheels are spinning. I often feel I should do more. I should create more. I'm not as far along with XYZ as I'd hoped to be, when really everything has a way of blossoming in its own time. The rain always knows when to fall. Grass doesn't force to grow. Nature always knows. It uses its internal compass to guide and provide. Going back to our story of CinderDane, she wasn't sold on being a certain size to find the love of her life. Once she accepted her size and gave up resisting it, her life unfolded effortlessly in the way it was meant to unfold. Remember, what you resist persists. Release, let go, and have faith. Check me out, giving an impromptu sermon. Speaking of sermon, I've been attending midnight mass. No, not in church. On Netflix. If you like sci-fi, it's a must-watch. I also binged Clickbait, and although Zoe Kazan's character got under my skin, I stuck with it and was not disappointed. Nothing against Pia Brewer. It was really just her blonde Cleopatra hairdo. Her blonde locks were in horrible contrast to her complexion. As a brunette who's once tried to go platinum, I know a bad dye job when I see one. Why not allow her character to simply be brunette? For me, the look was distracting. Speaking of being brunette, I saw this Raleigh psychic the other week who could not get over my light skin and dark hair. I explained that according to Ancestry.com and 23andMe, that I was predominantly Irish, like over 90%. He told me that I had an ancestral curse, that my dark hair came from a cursed Eastern European woman who traveled to the United Kingdom, married, and became part of my lineage. And that is where my so-called curse originated. Piece of cake, he said. It's basically nothing. I can remove it for you now. I've already done 3 today, he tells me. I knew this guy was a phony, but I went along for the ride. Part of me was mildly amused. I sat on this bench in his office while he held a Bible and a cross over my head, chanting indiscriminately while yawning under his breath. Yawning. Really? Yes, yawning. This quickly became comical. Afterward, come to find out that the removal didn't work because I didn't feel heat or tingles anywhere at any time during the process. So much for being a piece of cake. By the end of the session, the tables had turned, and I had become his therapist, so to speak. This is pretty much the norm for me. I'm so good at the old "and you" follow-up question that many people find themselves inadvertently revealing their vulnerabilities. It's a blessing and a curse, and I feel very lucky whenever I'm able to connect with people on a deeper level. Even crazy ass snake oil salesmen. Ancestral curse or not, I'd say I'm pretty fortunate. Here I am on a Monday night with you, watching Monsterland on Hulu and sipping wine. Oh, what's that? What kind am I drinking? Well, usually I prefer a good, full-bodied Cabernet Sauvignon. But tonight I'm enjoying blackberry wine from Duplin Winery. Or is it Duplin? Anyway, it's a local North Carolina winery. And it's a sweet wine, in case blackberry wasn't a giveaway. The bottle is in the kitchen. I got up to check the label for you. No phoning it in for this gal. I used it to chase down some nachos. Anyway, in this particular episode of Monsterland, episode 4, season 1, there's a small peacock statue by a window in an office, which reminds me of a conversation I had earlier this week with my friend Tim out in California. Did you know peacocks roam wild in Southern California? I lived in Southern California for 2 years, almost a decade ago, and never once happened across a feral peacock. Apparently, they were introduced, became acclimated, and declared protected by law by the late 1800s. How cool is that? Well, you might not think so if you're a resident of Southern California. they've become a real nuisance. LA County even instated a no-feed ban. Can you imagine considering such a beautiful fowl a nuisance? Well, Californians have had enough of peacocks eating their flowers, defecating everywhere, and pecking at their own reflections in car windows and glass doors. Crazy, isn't it? We pay to see them in zoos and rescue sanctuaries. Do you happen to remember a couple years ago when an emotional support peacock was barred from a United Airlines plane? I believe this was 2018. The peacock's name was Dexter. How cute is that? Apparently, he didn't meet the size and weight requirements. In photos, he appears very well behaved. I mean, they allow children on airplanes. Dexter's mom even offered to buy him a ticket, but to no avail. I'm sorry, poor Dexter. For the record, that's Todd snoring again. For the record, your wings are more beautiful, more brilliant, and more powerful than any tin bird in the air. Actually, did you know that when it comes to peacocks, only males have those long, beautiful feathers? In fact, it seems to be true throughout the animal kingdom. For example, male cardinals are a bright red. Male betta fish have bigger fins. And male ladybugs are, well, wait, here's an exception. Male ladybugs are smaller than female ladybugs. I used to think orange ladybugs were female ladybugs, but as it turns out, they're actually Asian lady beetles. I digress. You're not still paying attention, are you? I'm about to walk the neighborhood and check out the Halloween decorations. If you aren't sleepy yet, why don't you join me? It just started raining, so you'll need your slicker and galoshes. No, I don't mind the rain. Do you? Tell you what, let me prepare some hot chocolate in a thermos, and we can head out. Oh no, not too chilly. I'd say it's about 68 degrees outside, but I'm willing to bet it feels more like 65. I don't think you'll be too warm with a raincoat. It's the kind of night where you'd catch a chill if you got wet. And anyway, don't worry. We're not going very far. Okay. Are you ready? Be very quiet, not to slam the door and wake the dogs. Let's begin on Oakwood. There's a guy down here with the most intricately carved pumpkins on display. The thing about rainy fall nights, like this one, is that they really usher in the change of the season. I just love how the wind gently shakes the leaves from the trees. This fresh smell of newly fallen acorns and the rain is divine. Just be very careful you don't slip on the wet leaves. What is that up ahead? It looks like a single red balloon. Over there. Just floating next to the vapor sailboat, heading toward the gutter. There must have been some sort of child celebration earlier. Okay, here we are. The Mac Daddy of pumpkin displays. It's pretty crazy, isn't it? He did the entire cast of Ghostbusters. And over there is Charlie Brown and the Great Pumpkin. What's that? No, that. That looks like the seasonal cereal box characters. Hold on. Let me see if I can guess them all. I see Count Jocula, of course. He's pretty recognizable. There's Boo Berry. And that looks like Frankenberry. And next to him is Fruit Brute. And it looks like he wrapped it all up by including Yummy Mummy. No pun intended. Classic. I like that. He's got his display of gremlins right underneath. Oh. And over there is Casper, the friendly ghost. This reminds me of a poem by Robert B. Shaw titled Jack-o'-lantern. And it goes, candle, spoon, and carving knife, nearing the vigil of the dead. Let's impose a little knife, a little life, upon a ripening, faceless head. Slice and pry the handled top. Shovel out the mush and seeds. Cut before we hear the clop coming too close of chalky seeds. 2 triangles make the eyes. Another makes a classic nose. 3 teeth, square and oversized, complete a countenance that glows. All night by its captive wick, its parody of intellect, idle amusement for the quick, and yet the venturous dead are checked. Shades of traitors that are given 1 night's leave of Satan's jaws. Throngs of warlocks, wild, unshriven things, with Laramie claws. Boogies by the wide heavens aboard. Witness their own defective will when they flee this grinning gourd, presiding on our windowsill. Of whom or what an effigy that is for itself to know. All Hallows turn us free to lift the cranial lid and blow. How are you doing? Are you getting wet? Okay, good. Let's go up just a little ways and hang a left on Elm Street. Yeah, Elm Street. But no, don't be afraid. No nightmares there. Though speaking of which, What's your favorite Halloween flick? I don't believe I've seen that one. Is it on Netflix? Maybe we can watch that when we get back. I bought some kettle corn to pop. Oh, me? Well, I like the classics. I love It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, and Garfield's Halloween Adventure. I've watched them every year since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. Oh, right here. Turn left. I love the houses on this street. They're so old and Victorian. They have a lot of character. Watch for that puddle. And look at that. Over there on your left. The big plastic jack-o'-lantern leaf bags. Very retro. When was the last time you jumped into a pile of leaves? I guess it was last week for me. Do you smell that? It's coming from the donut shop up the street. Let me treat you to a warm apple donut. They're my favorite this time of year. Now hold the door. Come on in. Hi. How are you? Could I please have 2 apple donuts? Thank you. Which button do I press for credit? Oh, hit cancel. Sorry, all these machines are the same. Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good night. My goodness, this really hit the spot. I know, isn't it great? This stroll reminds me of something Kurt Vonnegut said about telling his wife he's going out to buy an envelope. Oh, she says, well, you're not a poor man. You know, why don't you go online and buy 100 envelopes and put them in the closet? And so I pretend not to hear her and go out to get an envelope because I'm going to have a hell of a good time in the process of buying one envelope. I meet a lot of people and see some great looking babies, and a fire engine goes by, and I give them the thumbs up, and I'll ask a woman what kind of dog that is, and I don't know. The moral of the story is, we're here on Earth to fart around. And, of course, the computers will do us out of that. And what the computer people don't realize, or they don't even care, is we're dancing animals. You know, we love to move about. And it's like we're not supposed to dance at all anymore. Let's all get up and move around a bit right now. Or at least dance. Okay, let's make another left here. There isn't too much on this street. As you can see, it borders the length of the cemetery. You really should visit that during the day. I think the oldest headstone is from 1826. Are you getting cold yet? No, I'm okay. I even think the rain is starting to lighten up. I'm glad we did this. Who knows how much longer the weather will be so temperate. Are you planning to dress up this year and hand out candy? Oh, neat. That sounds like fun. I haven't been to a Halloween party in forever. That's a pretty clever costume. You're going to knock them dead. Haha. Get it? No, I think I'm going to stick with, hold on. Let's turn left here. This is our street. Anyway, like I was saying, I think I'm going to be a witch again. I'm a witch every year. I hand out the big candy bars too. And I always make sure my fellow witches get extra. I like to hand out juice boxes and stickers too. I so look forward to the trick-or-treaters every year. Oh, look at that house with the white curtains and purple lights. The strobe lights are a nice touch. And it looks like they have something in their third-story window. Here. Let's cross the street to see if we could get a better view. Oh yeah. And it looks like they've suspended fake bats from the ceiling. That's really clever. Have you noticed all the frogs out tonight, hopping about? Do you think one of them might be a prince? Nah. I've kissed enough frogs in my life. I won't be doing any of that tonight. You can go right ahead. By the way, thank you for coming with me. This really helped to put me in the spirit. Now look at that. We're back home. Come on in, let's dry off a while. I made that hot chocolate and left it sitting on the counter. It's still warm. Would you like a cup? I have mini marshmallows I can stick in it. Go ahead and make yourself comfortable on the couch. I'll be right in. The remote is on the chair over there. My Netflix password is Hocus Pocus. See if you can find that movie you mentioned. Did you find it? Is that Jack Nicholson? Oh yeah. I actually think I did see this one before. Oh, look over there. Todd is fast asleep in his bed. He's dreaming. It looks like he's having a dream in which he's playing with his sister. Isn't it precious? I almost forgot to make the kettle corn. Let me go pop that in the microwave. What's that? You've never had kettle corn? Well, it's a time for firsts. And you're in for quite a treat. I love kettle corn. I'll be right back. And is it okay if I leave just the screen door closed? I love the smell of rain. Here's an Afghan I sewed if you catch a chill. And by the way, would you mind lighting that candle on the coffee table? Oh, thank you. It's apple cinnamon spice. Okay. Here you go. Right? It's good, isn't it? Cool. I'm glad you like it. Yes, I remember these opening credits. You know, there's a rumor that Stanley Kubrick's image was imprinted in the clouds. Right here, actually. Pause it real quick. Okay, now rewind it just a little bit. Okay. No, it looks like you went too far. That's okay. You don't mind rewatching the opening scene, do you? Here, give me the remote. I know exactly where to pause it. Here it is. Can you see it? Yeah, me either. So much for rumors. Feel free to stay as long as you'd like, but don't mind me. I think I'm getting a sugar crash from that donut. I'm feeling kind of sleepy, And I think I'm going to rest my eyes for a little bit. But don't worry, I'm not sleeping. I'm still paying attention to the movie. If I am asleep by the time the movie is over, would you mind waking me up?